Chapter 38. What are our characters' motivations? Kimberly asked. Good question, I said. I thought for a moment. There were countless movies where things like motivations were dropped leading to the conclusion of the story. By that point, the audience is usually invested enough to not even realize that the protagonists could just walk away. They are headed to the hospital, I said. That's the only set piece in the direction. We just so happen to have someone who is severely injured. Combine that with our innate curiosity or sense of justice and we're golden. Truthfully, I didn't know what my character would be thinking right then, and I didn't care. Adrenaline was pumping through my veins so fast I could hardly think. I kept hearing a sound I thought was the rushing sewers, but I soon realized it was just my own blood rushing I was hearing. I took a few deep breaths. We had gone off screen as soon as Second Blood ended. We were just outside of town square. There were people everywhere. It was a massacre. Guys, Dinah said. We have to stop. We'll lose them if we stop, Ant-Man said. Look, Dinah said. She pointed back to town square. We were quite a distance from the collapsed sewer where we had climbed up, but there were many holes just like it throughout the entire area. She was pointing to a mound of mud and cobblestones near a tilted statue in the center of town square. The time capsule, Kimberly said. Dinah must have noticed it because of her outsider's perspective drop. It jutted up from a mound created by the flood. Its lock was still attached, but the capsule had warped badly from its tumultuous unearthing. I can bust through that, Ant-Man said. It's broken. Look. He put his hand on one of the panels that had been used to build the contraption. The weld is busted. There's a crack big enough to get my hand in. Weird, I said. You'd think it was too early for us to get this. And I was right. He placed his fingers in the crack and started pulling. He wasn't wrong. The structure really was broken. He was making progress. He pulled against the metal. Whatever help I could be, I tried to be. It felt like we were bending it. I could feel it straining on my hands, even though there was hardly any place to put them. Something's in there, Ant-Man said. I can almost see it. Kimberly, reach in here when we pull back. She knelt near the large metal structure and began sticking her hand in. Just as she did, it started to vibrate. It was a familiar rumble. I managed to say, damn it, it was a trap. Just as the mound of dirt near the capsule started to rise and something underneath it began shaking. Now Carousel is playing dirty, Isaac said. With a pun like that, he must have lost a lot of blood. We had gotten greedy. And we would pay the price. Run. I screamed as if the others needed to be told. On screen, the mound of dirt continued shaking. The faces on the back of the giant frog started to be revealed. It had buried itself. That was how the capsule had been unearthed. We had just woken the beast in a way we had never intended. Time out. Ant-Man screamed just as chase and fight scene flipped on at the same time. Suddenly, the mound of dirt with a horrific frog underneath stopped moving. I normally wasn't around for Ant-Man to use his timeout drop. How fun. Is there an advantage to running into the carnival area? He asked. We could lose it in the buildings. He had a point. If hiding was our best bet, the mess of overturned carnival booths and amusement park rides was a good bet. We may have to try that to keep Isaac alive, I said. The frog would attack the person with the lowest hustle. That was Isaac and Cassie. Sacrifice me, Isaac said. I'm not good for anything right now anyway. Let me die for you. Cassie was fully crying and embraced her brother tightly. It's okay, he said. He's a big boy. Might not even have to chew to swallow someone my size. I'll get to see what else is in there. It wasn't a bad suggestion. I was a little relieved that he was the one to suggest it. I might have even agreed with him if Kimberly didn't have a better idea. Look at the statue, she said. I immediately understood what she was saying. The tower was tilted way off its base. Like the capsule, some of its welds had been broken. Kimberly's savvy was tied with mine at that moment. She had picked a learned background as a nurse using convenient backstory, and she had put her hair up in a ponytail to activate Does anyone have a scrunchie? That transferred much of her moxie into savvy as well. Her plan just might work. I wasn't sure her plan would work. The frog was Pennsylvania 45. Every time we had been overleveled, we had made a point to avoid confrontation. Her plan involved facing almost head-on. 10 seconds left, and one said. "We can't hope to kill it," I said. "But we might be able to slow it down." "It can't have high savvy, can it?" Dinah asked. "It's a frog." I shrugged. "Sounded right to me." "It does have dumb looks on its faces," Isaac said. 3 seconds, and one said. "You all know what to do." And, on screen, the mound of earth started shaking again and the frog emerged, human skin, bones, and organs, all exposed. It opened its eyes. Incapacitation. I couldn't move, but I knew it would pass. The statue wasn't 20 feet from the frog. "Oh damn," someone said. It nudged forward. At its size, it would be to the statue in a single hop. The margin for error was very thin. "Run!" I screamed as the frog shook itself and started evaluating new prey. I turned tail and ran. And one was already behind the statue. Isaac and Cassie were right in front of me. I ran as fast as I possibly could. I could hear the frog gearing up to jump behind me. Something flew past my ear. Before I saw it, and one had drawn his gun and fired 3 shots into it. The tongue. The frog wasn't following us. We were close enough for it to just grab us and slurp us up. It had withdrawn its tongue from the gunshots, but soon enough, it was firing again. I grabbed Cassie and Isaac's arms and pulled them to the ground. The creature's tongue barely missed us. "And one!" Kimberly screamed. "Push this over." The frog leapt. In seconds, it was right behind me. It could crush me with 1 foot. I couldn't see what the progress was on the statue. I was on the ground on top of the Hughes siblings. The statue was on the verge of toppling. All it needed was a strong enough push and it would topple. The frog was directly in its path. The statue was big enough to believably injure the thing. We just had to hope its animals' our psychic ability didn't kick in and give it the good sense to move. The frog's tongue came out again. This time, it wrapped around Cassie. "Push!" And one screamed. The statue didn't budge. Bang! A loud shot rang out from somewhere. Bang! I looked around at the source. That's when I saw him. Kurt Willis, GI Paragon, limping at us from across the square. He held a gun larger than his leg and he was firing it at the giant frog. The bullets weren't doing lethal damage, especially with the creature's Pennsylvania and tropes, but it did just enough to make it withdraw its tongue and hop away from the bullets. It rubbed up against the statue. The statue fell directly onto the frog's back leg. I heard a snap. "Get up!" I screamed at Cassie and Isaac. We were close enough that when the frog struggled to be unpinned by the statue, we would be crushed. We managed to get up and scramble out of the way as the frog leaped away, clearing 20 feet in one jump. I had assumed the frog had broken a leg, but I wasn't sure. Its tropes helped protect it from damage, but I had distinctly heard a snap. Willis continued firing shots at it as it left. Then, he said, "I don't know if Hallie killed Geist, but I have a sneaking suspicion he isn't innocent." He was still wearing his borrowed shorts and shirt, but the shirt was torn. As Cassie predicted, he was covered in blood. His high grip made the wounds a minor inconvenience. He had a bandolier full of large bullets wrapped around his body like a sash. "Sorry I was late," he said. "Got swept out into the river. Had to get my cannon from my car." He tapped the large gun in his hands. Cannon was a good name for it. It was neither a shotgun nor a rifle. It was huge, too big for a real-life police officer, but just right for a fictional one. "How are you alive?" Ant-Man asked. "I'm 200 pounds of heart to kill," Willis responded. "Now someone tell me what the hell is going on." Off-screen. We didn't actually need to fill him in. I got the impression that he had run this scenario every which way it could be run. "Man, you guys are coming right along," he said. "Might get something close to a perfect run. If my cigars hadn't gotten soaked, I could have lit one after the frog ran off. That would have sealed things, don't you say? Willis hummed in on Antoine and started correcting his techniques. His lack of quips, bullet counting, and general choreography were up for criticism. He must have been watching us for a while. I was just glad we got a chance to take a breath. "So you all tried to open the capsule, huh?" he asked with a laugh. "I suppose you learned your lesson." "Everybody does eventually." Antoine nodded. "So all I got is one question left for you all. Are we going for the solve here? I see you're chasing the doctor for a finale back at Hallowed Heart. You know we can just run away. If we get out of the city, the movie ends. Of course, a lot of the footage gets cut if we do that, but we don't have to risk getting things wrong." It was so tempting. Those frogs were incredibly disturbing, and the hybrids in Hallie's arsenal could freeze your blood with a look. But I needed answers. "We're going to solve it," I said. The others nodded in agreement. Isaac didn't, but he was too far gone. "We're going to the hospital?" he asked with a laugh that turned into a cough. His stitches were bleeding. "I'm in no shape to go to the hospital. He might not survive the finale." "Most people don't solve this their first time," Willis said. "The clues are things your characters are supposed to already know going into the story, so you have to learn it before the omen. Usually, folks solve it the next day after it's over and they've had time to think." He stretched as he talked. "We were in for a fight. This story doesn't feature the players as much as most of them do, but if you solve it, you're the headliners. I'm excited to see what you got." We had played a story like that before, Permanent Vacancy. That story, or at least the version we played, was mostly about Samantha and her dad. We didn't show up until halfway through the movie. This one must have been the same. The villains were featured prominently. That likely meant the audience would have more clues than the players, which could explain why this story felt like we were on a tour through a mystery, not actually solving it. It was a cold case. The clues were hidden by time. That wasn't without precedent for old-school mysteries where the detective didn't even show up on screen until the second act. The question was, could we figure it out with the information we acquired? I hated the idea that Isaac had been maimed. I couldn't let it be for nothing. "Let's get a move on, soldiers," Willis said, chuckling. With a glance at me and Isaac, he added, "It's time to meet your maker." Chapter 39. We moved as quickly toward the hospital as we possibly could. Isaac was slowing us down. He was bleeding out. Unfortunately, because of his sedation and the tropes that he had equipped, it was nearly impossible to tell exactly how close he was to death. A few times I actually thought he had died, but the red wallpaper confirmed that he had not yet, though his dead indicator status had lit up briefly once or twice, sending Cassie into tears. As we moved, I tried throwing out ideas of what we would do when we got there. Trying to string together some motivation for our characters was difficult. This storyline made it difficult the moment we decided not to just run for the hills. "Whatever you do," I said, "don't try to kill him." I had other ideas on how we would get his magic little wake-up gun out of his pocket. Unfortunately, they relied on Isaac to survive until we found the good doctor. On screen. "Everyone down!" Willis screamed. I hit the ground. I heard gunshots firing. I heard the sound of things dying, though I could not exactly call them screams. It was Antoine shooting, not Willis. "Move!" Willis cried again. Off screen. "It's a dance," Willis said. "Don't just bam 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 kill every enemy you see. Shoot one duck behind the car, then pop out and shoot another. Let it rush you for a few feet, and shoot again. Make it entertaining." "I just stopped shooting them?" Ant-Man asked. "They were coming right for us. I'm supposed to just let them get closer?" "You evaluate, you make a judgment, and you give Carousel a nice piece of footage. Never let the audience know when things are easy, or they won't be." Ant-Man sounded frustrated. We kept moving forward, a half block at a time. The frogs were everywhere, strategically placed so that they were behind things in your line of sight, only to jump out at us as we moved forward. Most of them weren't serious threats. Some didn't even attack us. A lot chased NPCs, But they never did that close enough to us for us to intervene. On screen. Hospital's half a block further, Willa said. He's still cracking jokes? Isaac moaned. Kimberly was helping him along. She looked him over and said, "We don't have long. He's lost a lot of blood." "There they are," Dinah said. "Going in the back way." She pointed toward the hospital. Our detour with the giant frog hadn't taken us much time on screen. Hallie, Cecilia, and Bobby must have slowed down for us to catch up for continuity. "We'll deal with him late," Willa said. "We need to get to the emergency room. My money says it'll be packed." That was a bet he lost. We made it across the final street to the hospital. The emergency room was to the right. The direction Hallie had gone was to the left. "I'm following them," Dinah said. She picked up speed and took off toward him. "We'll be right behind you," I said. As she left, she made notes on the red wallpaper using pen pal. I could only see 2 before she got too far away for me to see the rest. We couldn't go after her yet. We had hoops to jump through. "Oh my God," Kimberly said as we rounded the building toward the emergency room. I might have said the same thing. There were dead NPCs everywhere. More than I had ever seen. It was raining, but the water that flooded over the ground of the parking lot was thick with blood. "And you were worried it would be crowded," Isaac said. We rushed to the door. It was locked. And one banged on the door. It was an automatic, but they had disabled it and piled chairs in front of it. "Hello," Cassie screamed. "We need help." A lone nurse poked her head over a stack of chairs. Her nose had been bleeding and she looked scared out of her mind. "Help," Cassie screamed. "My brother's hurt. Please let us in." That was a slip-up. They hadn't been established as siblings in this story. Perhaps the audience will think she is lying for sympathy. The nurse looked tempted to help and even started moving a chair, but then she got a full view of Isaac's face. Fear overcame her. She turned tail and ran. We watched her as she faded into the distance. Oh well. We tried. At least it was an excuse to get to the hospital. As the nurse faded into the distance, she stopped, turned, and started running toward us. We saw through the glass windows as a swarm of frogs the size of dirt bikes started chasing her back toward us. As she got to us, she tried on stacking the chairs to escape, but she was too late. I saw her get dragged backward and that was the last of her. "We need to move," Willa said. "There's a hospital west of here. It's smaller, but it might be safer." "No," Cassie said. "We have to save him. We need the doctor. He'll help." "That quack is the one who did this to him," Ant-Man said. Cassie started to cry. "He will help. Plus," I said, "that woman Celia is with him. She knows something about Geist." "How can you think about that right now?" Ant-Man asked. "That was a publicity stunt. Who cares who killed the lonely rich guy? We had gone with Ant-1 being the skeptic who argued against our ideas. We needed someone and he seemed like the most down-to-earth character we had." "Damn it," Ant-Man said. "If he turns me into one of..." He shot a glance at Isaac. "If he does that to me, kill me. .. We followed Dinah's notes on the red wallpaper right back to Hallie's office. That was little surprise. We found her hiding in the shadows and watching as Hallie packed a bag. We had been off screen for a bit. When I got a clear view of Hallie's office, I saw why. On screen. "Why didn't you find me, Bobby?" Donna, his NPC wife, cried. "I waited so long. I knew you were out there somewhere." She had found him at long last. He was crying, but he couldn't reciprocate because his tongue was unnaturally long. He hugged her. She ran a finger over his odd scars, his deformities. She didn't seem the least bit deterred by his grotesque appearance. As they embraced, she suddenly fell into his arms. Hallie stood behind her holding a syringe. "She knows our little secret now," Hallie said. "I told you that if she found out she would join us, didn't I?" Bobby growled. He sounded like a dog. We needed to get in there. He lunged at Hallie, but instead of going for his throat, he reached for something on Hallie's person. "He's going for Hallie's little wake-up gun," I said. Bobby had seen my insert shot trap activated on the red wallpaper. He was going for the anti-serum applicator under the pretense of trying to reawaken his fake wife. I rushed into the room. Hallie was not a physically dominant enemy, but still, he gave Bobby a difficult time. I noticed that Cecilia stood behind Hallie's desk. I hadn't been able to see her before. She was just watching. Not a care in the world. Even without seeing her eyes, I could tell she wasn't alarmed at all. Bobby managed to remove the wake-up gun from Hallie's pocket. He couldn't get a hold of it, in part because of his deformed hands. He knocked it away from Hallie. He knocked it right toward me. I grabbed the gun. I did the classic pretend dilemma thing that characters do in movies, as if I didn't already know what to do next. I glanced up at Cecilia. I ran to her and stuck the applicator against her arm and pulled the trigger. Cecilia stumbled backward but didn't react beyond that. It wasn't going to be as easy as bringing her out of sedation. I needed to solve the mystery. That's how these things worked. Can't get around that. Your name isn't Cecilia at all, is it? I said. She wasn't looking at me. She looked at her gloved hands. Don't, she said. Don't say it. You're Lillian Geist, I said. Winner of the first Miss Carousel pageant. You're supposed to have died when the Geist mansion burned up. She didn't say anything, but she did turn her attention up toward me. Had I not said enough? Was I just wrong? It was odd that we found a folder of photos of Miss Carousel winners in Hallie's office. At first, I thought it was some sort of plastic surgery nightmare storyline, but that wasn't it. It was a story about animal-human hybrids and skin frogs. The only Miss Carousel photo in Hallie's office that wasn't scribbled all over belonged to Miss Carousel 1972. That was Lillian Geist. All of the signs had pointed to Lillian Geist from before this storyline even started. The newspaper clipping about her winning the first annual Miss Carousel pageant had stuck out like a sore thumb when we read about the Geist family. That picture in Hallie's folder had been of her true face. It was the first time I had ever seen a Geist, assuming a statue didn't count. The clue Kimberly and Antoine discovered about the mansion burning up, allegedly killing Lillian Geist, was placed conspicuously in the same room where we first met the veiled woman, Cecilia. Even the new hospital wing being the type that a burn victim might be admitted to was a clue. All of it revolved around her. All of it pointed to her presence. But they weren't real clues. Not for a detective. They were clues for an audience, for the people watching the movie. To them, finding that photo would have meaning. That was for the benefit of the audience. It was some type of callback for them. We had been given precious little backstory for this story. From what Willis had implied not so subtly, this story followed the villain's perspectives more than it did ours. We as characters were not being led to the truth. We were just here to try to survive the carnage. What you said about Jed Geist abandoning his family, I said. You were talking about yourself. He abandoned you. You attacked him. I didn't have the motive figured out, so I tried to be vague. It's not my fault, Cecilia said. It wasn't my fault. I couldn't control myself. It was what they did to me. She had said that if someone could change their name, they could change who they were. She had sure tried. She reached up with trembling hands and removed her veil, pulling it off her head completely so that we could see her whole face and head. She had been burned, of that I was sure, but that wasn't even a fraction of what horrors had been done to her. Her face and head were covered from scalp to neck, with wriggling creatures that looked like a cross between a snake and a worm. They were not freely moving. Instead, it looked like they had been grafted into her skin directly, one of Hallie's early experiments no doubt. She put a trembling hand up to her face and felt the wriggling things. She screamed in abject horror. Cecilia, Dr. Hallie said. Calm down. I'll get you sedated shortly. Just calm yourself. All will be set right. But Cecilia, or should I say, Lillian, grabbed onto one of the wriggling things and yanked it off her face. Blood poured from the place where the creature had been affixed. Leave the Sicilians alone, Cecilia, Hallie said. Don't damage yourself further. I can still fix you. She didn't listen. She ripped another Sicilian off, whatever that was. Cecilian. That isn't my name, she said. I can never escape my family. Lillian Geist, the beauty queen. Plot armor, 25. Geist. Tropes. The tormented. This villain is out of the ordinary, but you don't know why. An affront to nature. This villain is revolting to see for the first time. One glance will leave the viewer incapacitated with revulsion. Homelar advantage. The villain can travel freely, unnoticed due to their knowledge of the setting and its passages, both public and secret. They'll never believe you. When tangling with this villain, the authorities will not believe or take seriously anything the players tell them. Animals are psychic. The villain demonstrates knowledge that it has no logical means to acquire, an instinct to kill or survive. Far gone. This villain has lost their humanity, but not all at once. Something remains. Interest aligned. This entity does not need the players to lose in order to achieve its goals. Pattern killer. Before the finale, the villain will only kill victims chosen according to a pre-established motive. Non-combatant. This villain cannot be attacked on screen until it attacks the player or is otherwise identified as hostile. Attacking it will not be effective, nor will it change the story. It will cause the player to go off screen for a time. A woman scorned. Never underestimate a woman seeking revenge. All stats and saving throws are buffed against those who wronged her and those who try to stop her. Flashback monologue chapter 40. Here it was, the villain monologue. I had seen them before but never like this. But this time, something was different. We were not consistently on screen as she spoke, and more than that, it felt like her speech was not happening in the moment despite the words coming from Lillian's mouth. It reminded me of the cutscene that had occurred with the mirror and the time capsule. The audience was not seeing the scene as it was happening. Lillian was narrating. She started to speak, and for the first time, I saw something on the red wallpaper I had only been told about. The script. It was like a piece of paper in my head that scrolled as she spoke. The scene was titled Secret Lillian Geist Reveal. The scripted instructions that said, everyone watches as the newly revealed Lillian Geist explains her torment in Carousel. No one interjects except Dr. Haliev prompted. Lillian's speech started to scroll up, but far from the structured lines of text I had seen in actual scripts, it was an outline with checkmark boxes and sentences like the mansion fire backstory. Most of the monologue didn't appear on the script in any form, and when she spoke, the word ad-lib would appear in bold instead of the checkbox. Lillian took a deep, troubled breath. She was trembling with rage and trying not to cry. Somehow, she found the strength to calm herself and speak, shaking with every word. Ad-lib. Everything that is happening to punish us. I know it's true. My cousins and I all talked about it. For as long as I remember people talking about the Geist curse, she said. When I was a girl, I heard servants saying that Geists always get more than they deserve, but in the end, they get exactly what they deserve. Always, little quips like that, and only when I was there to interrupt them. One day, I listened by the door while my nanny talked to her sister on the phone. Find clip. Begin flashback. Suddenly, as she spoke, I saw a movie screen on the red wallpaper. A scene was playing on it. I saw the nanny. I saw a curious little girl sneaking outside of a large, wooden door in what must have been inside one of the Geist mansions. They were talking about a casserole recipe, but when I entered the room, she suddenly changed the topic of conversation to us, the Geists. I don't remember what she said, but it was something I thought was mean. It was like everyone knew what was happening to us, dying off one by one, but no one cared because everything we ever tried succeeded. Every business flourished. Every venture was tremendous. At first. End flashback. Find clips. Begin flashback. The flashback changed. I saw car dealerships filled with customers. I saw movie audiences packed into a theater screaming at one of the Geist horror movies. Then, there were ribbon cuttings, fancy cars, tuxes, and several mansions, all flashing before my eyes. End flashback. I thought they were jealous of us growing up. Now, I wonder if they knew we were just being set up to fall further, that there was a conspiracy of whispers, and everyone was in on it. She broke away for a moment and grabbed her head in frustration. Everyone knew who I was just by looking at me. Even as a child, before I was in the tabloids. Even when I disguised myself. How was that possible? Find clip. Begin flashback. I saw her dressed in full winter gear at a ski resort. Not an inch of skin was showing, yet a chipper young woman asked if she was Lillian Geist. End flashback. I woke up and found myself walking to the opening of a hospital wing today where no one looked at me. They stopped looking at me a long time ago. Where was I before the party started? I don't remember. It's all the fog. Is it the drugs, that damn sedative, or was it the town itself? I swear the town moves me from room to room, from party to party, from hopeless situation to hopeless situation without my knowing. I know how this must sound, but I swear it's like every moment of my life is a set. End idylib. The mansion fire backstory. Begin flashback. The flashback on the red wallpaper changed. Suddenly, I saw a beautiful woman in her late 20s walking down a large, ornate set of stairs toward what appeared to be a party of some kind. I recognized the woman as Lillian Geist from her picture in Hallie's office. I don't even remember the party where I got the burns. It was a big event, lots of people. For being a family everyone hated, people never failed to attend our parties. I don't know how the event started, and I don't remember getting ready for it. Has my memory merely faded, or was it ever there? I just woke up walking down the stairs. All eyes were on me. I was called beautiful no less than 100 times. Begin flashback. I saw scenes of people greeting Lillian. She looked uncomfortable. As she crossed a room, eyes followed her. People blocked her path wherever she went, greeting her dully. Then, there were flashes of red and orange. End flashback. After that, all I remember is the burning. Someone said there was a fire, and everyone looked scared, but no one looked surprised. If my life has taught me anything, it's the difference between afraid and surprised on a person's face. The townspeople are never surprised, not really. Just like you don't look surprised right now, Howard. Dr. Hallie didn't look surprised. He looked like he was waiting to get things over with. Is it insane to say that I think that entire party was for me? For my benefit? For my destruction? Hundreds of eyes watched me, waiting to see what was going to happen, and when it did, it was like they always knew. Their words were wooden. Most didn't even try to escape except to block my path. Lillian must have been trying to cry, but no tears came. She might not have been able to produce tears. By the time the entire place was ablaze, no one was watching anymore because Lillian Geist was dead in all ways that mattered. No one called me Lillian until Dr. Hale found me among the wounded. He treated my injuries. He took me to the only person I had left alive who cared about me, my Uncle Jedediah. The mansion fire backstory. Adilib. A nurse called me Cecilia once. Then she covered it up like it was a mistake. That was before Dr. Hallie suggested the name as my alias. How did she know who I was before I did? And Adilib. She might have just been a phenomenal actor, but her speech felt unrehearsed. Begin flashback. The flashback changed to show Lillian with horrible burns covering much of her face and head. She was bandaged up and unrecognizable. Days passed, and she went through multiple surgeries. Backstory of Cecilia transformation. I never wanted anyone to know what had happened to me. I couldn't stand the idea of people looking at me without calling me beautiful. That was my shield. When the people were staring at my beauty, it was like they weren't looking at me. I was hidden, even in a crowd of people. Somehow, I thought once people stared at my scars, it wouldn't feel the same. It took a long time for the burns to heal. Infection nearly took me so many times, but the town wouldn't let me die. Uncle Jed called me a survivor, but I don't think that's why I lived. It wasn't my time to go. The pain was like you couldn't imagine, chronic, unceasing. Things never changed unless they were getting worse. I turned to the pills to block the pain, both inner and outer, but soon enough, my tolerance grew. The pills never could help anymore. The flashback changed to show little snake worms, Sicilians, wriggling around in a container filled with Hallie's itcher. Then, Dr. Hale had an idea, a treatment that he said would take no more than a year. A revolutionary new substance that he had discovered could be used to not only stop the pain but to build me a new face. I was overjoyed. A new face. A beautiful face that people could look at instead of looking at me. No one would know who I was. But he had to do research, and then he said he needed to examine more patients. He told me to pick out what features I wanted. If I could find him someone to study, he would have the data to finish my treatment. End flashback. Backstory of Cecilia transformation. Adlib. For years, Howard, you had breakthrough after breakthrough, but each one only hurt me in new ways until, eventually, you put these things on me. You said it was a temporary measure, but by then, I knew that you were part of the conspiracy. I had known for a long time that you weren't trying to help me. You were part of my punishment. Every new thing you tried failed. Success was always a year away. I couldn't stand these creatures you sewed onto that you said would bring me closer to being finished. I knew it was a mockery. You didn't have to do this, but you did anyway. End Adlib. Backstory of Jedgeist murder. Begin flashback. I saw a dark, rainy night. I saw Jedgeist's house. One night, when you left for an emergency surgery, I started to run low on the sedative. I began to wake up. I rushed to Uncle Jed's house, but when he saw me, there was fear again, but still no surprise. Adlib. He must have known what was happening, but he wouldn't say. Why wouldn't he tell me why every Geist but him was subjected to such horrifying fates? End Adlib. I saw Lillian in her current state, staring at an older man whom I knew to be Jed. Anger overtook me, and I could feel a dark voice inside my head wake up for the first time. I took the fire poker, and I beat him with it. The treatment didn't make me beautiful, but it did make me strong. Backstory of Jedgeist murder. Adlib. I had nowhere to go and no allies anywhere. Somehow, I woke up here, back into painless stupor. I don't remember coming back. How did I get back here? Everything continued as normal. You constantly had breakthroughs and promises, but each one took us in circles. So tell me, Howard, are you in on it? Do you know why all these things keep happening to me? Who is putting you up to it? The script continued scrolling, and the words, players react to the reveal and try to survive the incoming horde. If Lillian attacks Hallie, go to scene, Dr. Hallie stare death. If she does not, the script disappeared. I could see it while it had instructions for me to stay still and not say anything, but it was gone once that was done. Lillian stepped around the desk toward Hallie and asked, "So, Howard, are you going to answer me, or are you just going to keep up the ruse?" Hallie almost rolled his eyes. He simultaneously appeared annoyed and terrified. "Cecil, Lillian," he said. "I have devoted my life to helping those with life-altering conditions like yours live normal lives. We are at the forefront of the current technology. The best I can do is make educated guesses about how long your treatment will take. Let's not forget that you volunteered for this. You chose this." Lillian was enraged. "I didn't choose this," she said, gesturing toward her body. "You said it was revolutionary and would heal me completely. You said it would take months, and then I could have a new life." She stepped further toward him. "You aren't going to tell me the truth, are you?" Hallie didn't respond. Instead, he took in a breath. He knew what was coming. After all, he could see the script. Chapter 41. Lillian Geist closed the distance across the office toward Hallie in a matter of seconds. They had the same plot armor, but I had to imagine that hers was more geared toward melee than Hallie's. "You did this to me," she screamed. "Tell me why." She grabbed him and quickly threw him toward the water fountain in the corner of the room. As she had said, the treatment Hallie gave her did not make her beautiful, but it did make her strong. As the fight bore on, the chorus of frogs in the distance grew closer. They had found their way here from the emergency room area. It was very polite of them to wait until just after Lillian's revealant speech. "We've got to get out of here," Willis screamed to us. Mystery or no mystery, the win condition of this storyline was escape the fray, and we had only gone further into it. "Come on, Isaac," Cassie said. She was trying to sound gentle and encouraging, but the adrenaline made the words come out through tears. "We just need to go a little further. Get up." Isaac wasn't going to get up. He wasn't dead, but his dead indicator on the red wallpaper was blinking faster and faster. He tried to speak. He couldn't. Lillian continued to beat on Dr. Halley, who had taken the scalpel from his pocket, the same one he had used to cut the ribbon earlier, and was wielding it at her in vain. "Are you going to mess my face up?" Lillian said with a laugh. She backhanded him. He dropped the scalpel. Then, she reached over to the fountain and pressed the switch to open the secret staircase. "Please," Halley said softly. He wasn't going to survive. I had gotten a glimpse of what this scene was titled on the script before it had been taken away. It was his staircase death. What I didn't know was that the scene had one last twist to throw. As Kimberly and I tried to help Isaac get up before the frogs arrived, I heard a scream from the entrance of the room. It was one of the malformed hybrids. Then another and another until a half-dozen or so arrived. The woman with the feathers, the various amphibian hybrids, and a man who looked like a warthog all came with their eyes fixed on us and Lillian. Their plot armor was higher than I was expecting, almost as high as mine. Halley had a trap that summoned protectors when the players or an ally attacked him. This meant that Carousel counted Lillian as our ally. His trap had been triggered. The warthog rammed Willis before he could respond. If I were to guess, this fellow might have been the guy who carried Isaac off through the tunnels when he was attacked on Bobby's orders. He was certainly big enough, with huge muscles and tusks protruding from his mouth. The warthog turned and started to run after me. I got ready to dodge. My high hustle would help me there. But it didn't even get to that. Antoine fired 2 shots at him. The warthog didn't seem to feel it but did decide to target Antoine instead of me. Antoine then jumped up and over Halley's couch to evade him. When the warthog charged again, Willis had regained his composure and fired 1 shot into the beast's leg, dropping him to the floor and another in his skull for good measure. The woman covered in feathers was down on the ground asleep before I even saw what happened to her. Kimberly had injected her with a heavy dose of Halley's sedative as she attacked. While the hybrids were technically targeting me because of Milo, Pennsylvania, they didn't seem shy about aiming at the others. After all, it would look weird if they didn't. A man with a snakeskin pattern on his face and a long neck bit at Cassie, who fell to the ground as she tried to back away. Then, the snake turned to me and bounded for me, only to fall as Cassie grabbed its ankle. Bobby was protecting his fake NPC wife. He barked at the hybrids, who strangely seemed to understand him and would respond in their animal tongues. As they moved through the room, they got closer to me, but they also got close to Lillian, who grabbed Halley's head and bashed it into the fountain. They must have been restricted from helping him until that point because as soon as she picked him up by the hair, 2 of the hybrids tackled her. Halley dropped to the ground. The whole thing was chaotic. The camera would have actually been on Lillian and Halley. Everything else was background. Lillian threw the hybrids aside with a few brutal swings and and she screamed. She went back to Halley, who was trying to crawl away and picked him back up by the hair. "No more promises from you," she said. She threw him down the steep stairway into the tunnels. He hit the stairs, bones audibly crunching the whole way down. For a moment, we went off-screen for what was likely a close-up of Halley's broken body at the bottom of the stairs. That gave me an idea for how I might use my cutaway death trap. A fall into darkness was an ideal setup. Soon after, the energy in the room changed. The hybrids Pennsylvania dropped down 5 or more points apiece. Halley must have been dead. His protective buff had vanished. The hybrids looked down the stairs as if in mourning, but they didn't have much time to be sad because the frogs arrived. The frogs didn't discriminate, but they did abide by their rules. In a fight or chase scene, they attacked the characters with a lowest hustle. Suddenly, I wasn't the person in the most danger. Some of the hybrids were. Once that they had lost their buffs, Frogs the size of refrigerators began jumping through the large plate glass windows separating Hallie's office from the rest of the floor and attacking whoever was nearest them. Those most in danger were the hybrids, Bobby's wife, and Bobby himself because he was hobbled and had terrible hustle. The enemy of our enemy was our friend. Those of us in the room started closing in on each other. Cassie, Isaac, and I had managed to get separated from the others in the large office. Cassie continued to try to get Isaac up, but he was a goner. A message appeared on the red wallpaper from Dinah that read, "Tunnels are off-screen." That was all the confirmation I needed. "We have to find a way out of here," he said. Isaac's dead indicator flickered even faster. He was almost gone. Cassie was trying to invoke her anguished drop to stave off his death, but that wasn't working. She cried to the heavens, saying, "I can feel your pain, Isaac, but we just have to go a little further." She couldn't feel his pain because he didn't. Between his blood-loss delirium drop and the sedative, he didn't have pain to share, and if he did, this was not a good moment for her to share it. She was too flustered to set up the power correctly. A frog swallowed the snake man and started choking on him. That didn't last long, though, because the frog managed to bite the hybrid in half. "There's an exit that way," Donna, Bobby's fake wife, said to him as more frogs jumped into the room. She pointed in the direction of the exit. "I saw it when I was looking for you." "Show us the way," Willis said. He ushered Antoine, Kimberly, Dinah, Bobby, and Bobby's wife out of the room. Willis knew his job was to help us escape, even if that meant leaving a few of us behind. He couldn't risk the survival of the group for a few injured players. If the others survived, we would, too, eventually. That was good for them, but they were closer to the exit. Cassie, Isaac, and I were trapped. Two frogs had found their way in and were scrambling over furniture toward Isaac. Cassie threw her body over him to protect him. She didn't need to in the end. "Hallie always said you creatures were the solution to all my problems," Lillian said, speaking to the nearest frog. It was large and had been used to grow human faces just like the giant frog had been. She walked slowly toward it and fell to her knees. The frog wrapped its enormous tongue around her and swallowed her in one bite. The other frog hopped closer to Cassie, Isaac, and me. Its eyes were not frog eyes, they were human. Its teeth were human, and its toes were also human. We couldn't get past it to get to the others. Luckily, the frog that killed Lillian was still working on her, so to speak, so it wasn't interested in us. The other was, though. With no one else in the room, it would target Cassie and Isaac. I had to make a decision, and I already knew what it was. Isaac was as good as dead, but Cassie didn't have to be. "I'll take Isaac," I said. "You escape and catch up with the others." "No," she said. "I can't leave him." "Cassie," I said. "You have to trust me. Our best chance is if you run. Let me take care of that thing." "I don't know who dies next," she said. I tried to pay attention, but I was scared. I grabbed her shoulder as the frog hopped closer. It looked jealous that it hadn't gotten to eat Lillian. "I know who dies next," I said. "And it's not you. Go help the others." I pushed her away from us as the frog jumped. The frog hit me, but it was more interested in Isaac. I figured it would be. I pulled Isaac away from it as it tried to scoop him up in its jaws. This creature tripped over its loose skin as it pursued us. All of the frogs tripped over their loose human skin, but it never seemed to slow them down. It was just shocking imagery. Cassie looked like she wanted to help, but I screamed, "Go!" She ran. The others couldn't have gotten too far. I still heard gunshots right down the hall. I pulled Isaac away from the frog. I didn't want to go too fast, so I baited it to make sure it didn't go for Cassie. I inched closer to the entrance to the secret staircase. With Isaac lying on the ground, painting the tiles with his blood, it was difficult for the frog to get at him. If the frog managed to get its tongue on Isaac, he was doomed. Selfishly, I knew that might not be the worst outcome. The frog would be distracted long enough for me to escape. Besides, it was possible Isaac wasn't going to live long enough to see the end anyway. But I couldn't just feed him up to the beast, not when there was another way. I couldn't help him live for long, but I didn't need to see him eaten either. I pulled Isaac down into the secret staircase, leaving him balanced on some of the steps below. He mumbled something, but I couldn't understand it. I quickly reached up and grasped the switch on the fountain and triggered it so the secret opening would close. I had to time things right. The frog jumped. At first, I thought it wouldn't get through. The entrance was closing fast, and the frog was large, but as it extended out for the jump, its body stretched thin enough to get through the hole. I had hoped it would just get close enough that I could feign being knocked down the stairs to my death. It hit me like a freight train. I screamed. I had to. The frog and I were tumbling backward down the staircase. I couldn't tell if we hit Isaac as we went down. It wasn't perfect, but I succeeded at my main goal technically. As I fell down the stairs, I noticed I was officially written off on the red wallpaper. Cutaway death sent us all off screen. My death had been implied by being attacked by the frog. I hadn't expected the full-on tackle. I had hoped it might try to wrap me in its tongue, which would then get caught by the closing secret door, but that was too much to hope for. I landed hard on the ground. I was already mutilated because of my hand surgery, but even if I hadn't been, I would be now. One of my arms was bent the wrong way. Pain surged through my body. Breathing hurt. My head hurt. I was bleeding. I looked around. I could hear the frog somewhere. Would it be too much to ask that it be injured, too? If it was, I couldn't tell. It was dark at the foot of the stairs. I thought quickly and crawled my way to the edge of the walkway where the ravine of rushing water waited below. I couldn't see very well, so I just listened. I hoped the frog wouldn't go back upstairs to look for the dying Isaac. Cutaway death implied some fight was meant to occur after it triggered, a fight with me. I tried to let my eyes adjust. I stood tall. I took off my hoodie quickly and draped it over my front. Sure enough, the frog's tongue shot at me, stuck to my hoodie, and ripped it away. I heard an odd coughing as it tried to swallow it. Then, I heard a sound I couldn't place, a slap. Next was a shuffle as the frog leaped at me. I waited until the last second and dodged out of the way. The creature sailed past me and fell into the raging stream. I didn't know how strong frogs were at swimming, but this frog had human toes, so I had assumed it wouldn't be too good at it. It also had human eyes, which is why I surmised it couldn't see in the dark. The only thing it lacked was a human brain, so it fell for the oldest trick in the book. I collapsed to the ground. The cool, damp concrete was oddly comfortable because I was so exhausted. I had to check on Isaac. I crawled over, letting my bad arm rest. I looked up the stairs. In the dim light, I couldn't see him, but I could detect him on the red wallpaper. He was written off, but he wasn't dead. Not yet. Luckily, he was unconscious. I would need to check on how being written off affected death. All I had to do was wait for my friends to get away, and I would be fine. We all would be. A light appeared against the wall next to the stairway. It was from a lighter. Illuminated in an orange flicker was the bloodied face of Dr. Howard Halley. "Mr. Lawrence," he said. His words sounded labored, his breathing shallow. "How do you know my son? What do you know about Simon Halley?" "Chapter 42, you asked about Simon Halley," he said. He was in bad shape. Not dead, but it was clear that the fall had injured him severely. "How do you know that name?" I had asked off-screen. He had not answered me at the time. I suspected that the script had been the reason. Now, both of us written off in a dark tunnel, the script didn't appear to be stopping him. "I met him a few months ago," I said. "At Halley Castle." Dr. Halley leaned his head back. I saw despair on his face. He didn't speak for a moment as he took it in. "They brought that damn castle too. How could they resist?" I didn't know what to say. I was afraid that one wrong utterance might make Halley less likely to talk to me or, worse, he might decide to attack. He looked me in the eyes. I could see him breathing deeply through his nose. "Is he like me?" "Yes," I answered. "He's a scientist. They brought him to Carousel." How could I have missed it? I thought for a moment. I remembered looking at the map Grace had set out to show how Carousel grew over the years. The castle he lives in, I said. It got brought here in 1999. But you would call it Carousel 1999 because that's something different, right? I had noticed that when the Paragons spoke of dates, they often put the word Carousel in front of it as if they were not just talking about a year. Hallie nodded. This story takes place in Carousel 1995, but I expect the real year is something different. 2022, I said. Amazing, he said. He thought for a moment. Carousel 1999. I've never been cast there. They kill me off in Carousel 1995, as you've just seen. But Simon, is he well? I didn't know what to say. Come out with it, boy, Hallie said. He's still trying to bring back his dead wife. He can disconnect his soul from his body. I don't know what to tell you. Hallie nodded. Astral science. When he was young, he showed much interest in the subject. I had hoped he would grow out of it. A waste of a brilliant mind. If only I had not gotten stripped from my family, he might have fared better. He tried to keep an even tone in his voice, but I could hear him struggling to remain composed. You were taken from your family? I said. Hallie nodded, strangely ashamed. When my experiments were prematurely uncovered, they tried accusing me of all manner of malfeasance. They could never understand how important my work was. Most of my patients rallied to my side at the trial. They testified on my behalf. They knew that once my methodology was perfected, I could correct previous mistakes. He swallowed hard. Of course, that was never to be. Did you get an offer to come here? I asked after he paused. By correspondence in my jail cell. An offer of amnesty. A job offer to work for a rich and influential family and all of the finances and subjects to continue my research. Given what I was facing, I hurriedly wrote back, accepting. A mistake, perhaps. I don't even remember arriving. There were a million things I wanted to ask. I tried to sort through them, to find the ones he would answer, the ones he would know about, but the more I thought, the more I feared ruining the conversation. All I could do was keep him talking. So you didn't know anything about how things would be once you got here? I got everything I was promised, but not in the way I expected. That doesn't sound fair, I said. Don't pretend to be concerned about my treatment, he said. I know you would have killed me had you the opportunity or ability. It was a courtesy, I said. Something you're supposed to say. True enough, he said. You'll find that the working definition of fairness is very warped in this place. The illusion of fairness. He nodded. You would not be able to understand this, he said, but I didn't notice that anything strange was happening for many years. My sense of the ordinary was taken from me. It all felt reasonable. The killings. The shadowy borders beyond understanding. I didn't question it. Shadowy borders? Wait, I said. Were you brought here before the game was created? Constance had told us that the actual game at Carousel wasn't always here. Hallie nodded. I will say, Dear Con, despite his deceptions, did keep his every word. He was a very reasonable man whenever you found a moment to speak with him. Is he still around? I asked. He ignored my question. More than that, it was like he didn't even hear it. When I woke up for the first time, I was the victim of a loathsome creature. I realized that I had not aged in decades. The guys and their scandal were ever growing then. I was always their family doctor. I realized I had not seen my family in all the time I had been in Carousel. I just hadn't noticed they weren't here. I was perfectly oblivious. I asked Dear Khan about it, and he was, again, very reasonable. He gave me my complete consciousness. All of my memories. At the moment, I knew exactly what kind of place this was. It was a kindness on his part. I'll never forget that. And then he asked me, would I still want him to bring my family here? Of course, I said no. I begged him not to involve them, to let me be enough, he said. Tears flowed from his eyes. He promised he wouldn't. He assured me. I should have got it in writing. They brought my family here anyway, it seems. Do you still have the clarity he gave you? I asked. Do you remember what he showed you? Hallie shook his head. I heard it said somewhere that we only remember that which makes us better at our roles. I do not remember where I heard it. That became even more true when the game began. No longer was the world in chaos. It was organized, you see. The horrors were tamed. They could not have things the way they were before. Everything needs to be separate. Everything needs to be locked away in its place. They put everything in a script, I said. I didn't know who they were, but I would get to that. Yes. Speaking of the script, he said. He looked up. His eyes glazed over for a moment. I am afraid to say that your friend's wife character has been killed. I assume you weren't close? I shook my head. He could still see the script even after being written off. The rest of my group is okay? I asked. Yes, he said. The soldier is very skilled at motivating people to run faster. Tell me about the game, I said. Please. I need to know. Hallie nodded. I can only tell you what I know. You do understand that, yes, and what I know is tightly controlled? I nodded. Carousel 1946, he said. The year I arrived both before and after the game was built. I was the family doctor to the Geiss. I was a pillar of the community. I did my experiments in a rarely visited storyline outside of town in the newly built Carousel Hills. Of course, it hadn't been named yet. The hospital was named for me. I was important. That made more sense. More than just his timeline with his son, his accent was dated for 1995. He had the manner of a man from an earlier time. I am not bothered to join tedious storylines for quite some time. In Carousel 1964, that changed. My age was a problem. I was too young, and getting older would make me less effective in my role. My history was changed. I was given an additional storyline at a cocktail party in one of the Geiss estates. I checked the pulses of murder victims and was occasionally the murderer myself. They changed the name of the hospital. They made me less prominent in the community. Still, I tended to the Geiss. In Carousel 1976, I take a break from my easy life and must voyage on a river expedition in search of a rare species of amphibian that is said to have a toxin that could work as a revolutionary sedative. This is nonsense. I did not get my sedative nor my itcher from a frog. They were having fun with me when they wrote that. I was a side character. The boat ends up surrounded by giant crocodiles. Terrifying. I listened intently to everything he was trying to tell me. Any detail might prove critical. Carousel 1995. I am cast as a shadow of my original story. I am stuck in the sewers operating on frogs. Someone had decided that was to be a theme for me. How juvenile. This role is for the thrill line. It is of the utmost importance. Unless I am needed in Carousel 1946, Carousel 1964, or heavens forbid, Carousel 1976, I am tending to the remaining Geists, Jedediah, and Lillian. I die quietly and am forgotten. Needed in Carousel 1946? I asked. Time travel? No, nothing of the sort, he said. You'll learn soon enough that Carousel has restrictions, seams in its construction. As much as they try to hide them, they cannot. The storylines are set in the past. They are the only way to find out what happened at the center of it all. The center of the story, I said. The birth of Carousel. That too. Time was layered in Carousel. It was not linear. I had so much I wanted to know, but there was one question that I needed answers to above all others. You say they a lot, I said. Sometimes you talk about Silas Dearcon. Other times you talk about someone else. Who are you talking about when you say they? I had heard people talk about Carousel as an evil entity in a town, Bartholomew Geist as its founder, and Silas Dearcon as both a partner of Geist and something else altogether. I also heard a they being referenced by both Hallie and the Paragons. He spoke of Dearcon with reverence. He spoke of they with disdain. They must have been different people. They don't like to be brought into the story, Hallie said. It's Guy's partners from the Founder's Tale, right? It says he needed help building the town, so he brought in partners. Hallie shook his head. Guy's partners in the Throughline are characters like yours truly, founder of the hospital. Though I suspect there may be some symbolic overlap. I don't remember. Oh, I said. They, he began, helped build the game at Carousel. They are insidious enemies. They recruited many of the current residents and ever so playfully defiled my backstory. To top it off, they brought my son here against my wishes. Tell me, he said, changing his tone, does my son succeed at bringing back the dead? No, I said. Not in the way he hoped. He nodded his head. He toils and is ultimately unable to take the final step, Hallie said. I did the same, you know. My treatment worked the first time. They took it from me. They locked it away. I don't remember it. I suspect they did the same to my son. Surely, he succeeded in his obsession. That made some sense. The senior Hallie said that NPCs only remember things that make them better for their roles. I wasn't sure. I had seen NPCs trembling at the memory of their fate. But it did make sense in general. Can't really be a mad scientist if you have the cure, I said. Hallie chuckled, then coughed. Mad science and obsession, he said wistfully, the Halbeck family curse. And Carousel does love families. I heard something stirring in the water behind me. I panicked. One of the frogs must have been back despite the heavy flowing stream. I did my best to scuttle against the wall next to Hallie. Fear not, Hallie said. I believe I have spoken out of turn. Carousel always gets upset when I talk about them. It's not even against the rules explicitly. What? I asked as something crawled up onto the concrete from the stream. I could barely see it in the glow of Hallie's lighter. But I heard it growling. It moved closer. Not a frog, no. It was a crocodile. I will see you again, perhaps in Carousel 1946, Hallie said. I would advise you, though. If I ever offer you a drink, you might want to accidentally drop it before imbibing. The crocodile snapped up Hallie's right leg and dragged easily down into the water. I was left alone. Chapter 43. The needle on the plot cycle was nearly to the end. I thought about crawling toward Isaac, but then I thought better of it. His dead indicator was blinking longer and longer. He was unconscious. The only thing that approaching him might do was wake him up. That would only cause him to suffer. I sat and contemplated how he was even still alive. His grit was nothing to write home about. He must have triggered as if he's still cracking jokes dropped constantly throughout the run. His injuries were minor but numerous. I just hoped he wouldn't be too affected. It took 20 minutes for the story to end. I was sure glad about it because it meant my hoodie had returned. The pain was one thing. The cold, wet ground was another. I stood and cracked my back. That made me feel better. Isaac was still asleep at the top of the stone steps when I climbed up to him. He was fully healed. I nudged his shoulder. He came to with a cough. I'm up, he said. As soon as he realized what was going on, he reached for his face to make sure it was back to normal. It was. His face and his shaggy hair both back the way they were before his ordeal. My shirt's not ripped anymore, he chirped, examining his tie-dye t-shirt. Thank God, I said. I was worried about that. He chuckled. It was actually one of the things I kept thinking about while I was zonked out. I only have one shirt with me. I need to go back to the hotel to change. I laughed. Yeah, that sedative really had a way of rearranging your priorities. I helped him to his feet. The switch to open up the secret path into the hospital was hard to find at first, but I must have found it because the door creaked open. Not so bad, eh? I asked. He shook his head. Not bad at all, he responded. He was lying. He got quiet for a moment as we walked out of Hallie's office and then asked me, did I die? No, I said. Even if he had, I might not have told him. Save that existential crisis for after the tutorial. We kept walking. I wasn't sure which direction the others had fled in, but soon enough, we found Dinah's messages on the red wallpaper, which were still there. We talked, theorizing about why we didn't start to turn into monsters as a result of being experimented on. I theorized that was for a different version of the story. That was the thing I was most afraid of, he said. If I hurt Cassie. Well, you didn't, I said as we made our way through the carnage. There were body parts everywhere. There were more than made sense. You think they knew what would happen to them? Isaac asked about the NPCs. Some did. Others didn't, I said. Howard Halley had given me an important piece of information in our conversation. He said that NPCs only remember what makes them better at their roles. Did these poor people improve at being victims by remembering what would happen? Could they even remember what would happen? Willis talked about them like their situation was something he had never seen before, a generation of NPCs born during the continuity loop of the tutorial. It was like he thought they were different. He questioned how they would fit into the storylines. NPCs usually respond at the same rate as a storyline's Omen did. But these NPCs didn't really have normal storylines. They were part of a throughline story, and those didn't stick around once they were completed. The tutorial would become a husk of what we experienced. Once we pushed the throughline forward, would they still have an Omen to regenerate for? I pushed those thoughts away. I was likely going to find out soon. I couldn't say for sure what the throughline would entail, but I was developing theories. The path of messages from Dinah led us back to the town square. It was still a mess. There goes that, I said. What? Isaac asked. I pointed to the time capsule. The mayor, a level 50 version of him, was having it loaded into a wooden crate and hauled away with a forklift. Back to square one on that thing. I suspected that if I talked to someone, I would find out it was still the day before the centennial, and it would be for quite some time. Let's wait here, I said. Isaac nodded. ~. It took a while for the others to return. When they did, Willis was not with them. He wasn't going to stick around for Silas, much like the stranger hadn't. That was annoying. I still had questions for him. Cassie hugged Isaac tightly. She even hugged me, as did Kimberly. It was a big, happy reunion. I didn't have frogs on my bingo card, Ant-Man said. I did, Isaac said. They continued talking and even laughing. I was waiting for our last arrival. Before long, he was there. Step right up, Silas the showman said. You won a ticket. This time, I was the first to hit the red button on his box. I got 2 stat tickets. It was really good, considering how high my level was. I received 1 drop. A method to the madness. Type, insight. Archetype, film buff. Aspect, filmmaker. Stat used, moxie. Method actors can be a significant strain on the patience of a director, producer, or any other member of a film crew. Trying to give such an actor pointers would be maddening. Could you imagine if the bad guy still acted evil when the camera was off? When off-screen with an enemy, the player will be able to continue talking to the enemy, but they will respond in character in similar ways to how they might on screen. Any information obtained must be re-established on screen. The player will see a timer for when they are back on screen. The enemy will not change their off-screen directions, so don't expect an easy conversation. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Unless, of course, you're asking it to a werewolf. I also got 2 enemy collectibles. I was surprised to get any. Technically, I did trick a frog into jumping into a stream, but that hardly felt enough to score a kill. It wasn't until I looked at them that I realized there was something off about them. Lillian Geist, 1995, Bartholomew Geist's granddaughter. Once the radiant star of Gilded Knights, Lillian Geist danced atop the precipice of her family's shadowed legacy, a beacon of grace untouched by the murky depths of ambition. Yet, as time etched its truths upon her, she descended, entwining her fate with the very darkness she once soared above. Engulfed by flames of retribution and subjected to the whims of a deranged intellect, she emerged not as a phoenix but as a spectre of vengeance, her beauty marred by the scars of her lineage and her own transgressions. Now, Lillian haunts the boundary between the past she rebelled against and the future she unwittingly crafted, a twisted monument to the notion that one can never truly escape the sins of their blood. That told me that solving her mystery was enough to get the collectible. There was something special about the guys. The next one had me scratching my head, too. I definitely didn't kill Dr. Halley. Dr. Howard Halley. Mad scientist. Dr. Howard Halley, once heralded as the savior of Carousel's afflicted, conceals beneath his laurels a truth as disfigured as his creations. Esteemed for his miraculous healings, his real magnum opus brewed in the shadows, the Itcher, a reagent of promised revival. Driven by a zealot's faith in his discovery, he ensnared the vulnerable in his grotesque ballet of science, merging flesh with beast in a twisted pursuit of salvation. Each failure, rather than a caution, fueled his obsession, blurring the lines between benefactor and tormentor. As his experiments spiral into aberrations, Dr. Halley's quest teeters on the brink of madness. With every desperate attempt to perfect his Itcher, one must wonder at the cost of his ambition. How many more will suffer before he either achieves his dream or is consumed by it? Kimberly was up next, and while she didn't get the trop, she did get 2 stat tickets and a license. Pretty much everyone but Willis and I were underleveled. It made sense they would get some stats from the storyline. License. License number, E2455B-0014 Issue 2, Kimberly Madison. Ability granted. The holder of this license is granted the ability to invoke specific powers or wield certain objects from a horror movie realm without the need of a trop. This license authorizes the use of Halley's sedative from the movie A Doctor Calls. Usage permitted in the through line, all storylines. X. Usage terms, lore constraints. The holder may use the selected ability within the lore constraints without the need to activate the associated storyline. Protection. The player is shielded from inadvertently triggering the original storyline. Rule compliance. The rules of use, as described in the movie's storyline, must be strictly adhered to in addition to any listed conditions. Consequence awareness. The user is not immune to the consequences stemming from improper or natural use of the ability. This license does not prevent unrelated storylines from being triggered. Rescue clause. Death as a result of using this ability subjects the player to rescue from the respective current movie's storyline. Conditions for use. 1. Requisition. The object must be acquired by the player and brought into the storyline. 2. Natural use. The object can only be used in the way the player's character would be able to use it. 3. Logical location. Unless the player has applicable trop allowing them to bring the object into a storyline, the object will be found in a logical location. 4. Shared use. Allies are able to use this object if narratively consistent. Notes. Misuse and revocation. Improper use of this license or the granted ability or object may result in immediate revocation and additional penalties as per the governing laws. Halley's sedative was powerful and would be very useful in storylines where it could be brought in. After reviewing our tickets, we returned to Halley's office to pick up some extra. There was only 1 vial. We would have to make it count in case it wasn't replenished. And one got 2 stat tickets too. He also got a trop and an enemy collectible. Better make it count. Type, rule. Archetype. Aspect. Stat used, Moxie. In movies, having 1 bullet left places a great amount of weight on that final shot. Luckily, the audience loves watching that last bullet hit its mark. When equipped, the player's last round, arrow, grenade, etc., will be more accurate and effective than any that came before it. Ensuring the audience is aware you are almost out of ammo boosts this trop's power considerably if done well. Most bullets are just background noise. Skin Frog, mutant creature. Amid the shadowy corridors of innovation, the Skin Frog exists, a chilling emblem of ambition morphed into a nightmare. Conceived to be architects of healing, these mutants, with their unsettlingly human skin, were once symbols of hope. Yet, from the depths of their creation, a sinister reality emerged. Enraged by their twisted existence, these behemoths of flesh embody the peril of playing God, As they rampage, they leave a legacy not of life but of lament. Cassie did a great job as a psychic. She got 3 stat tickets and 2 tropes. Empathic shield. Type, buff. Archetype. Aspect. Stat used, moxie. The fastest way to make the audience care about a character is to show them another character caring about them. When the player shows sadness, worry, or grief about an injured, captured, or otherwise imperiled ally, the ally's grit will be buffed. Now she's gonna cry, then I'm gonna cry. We're all gonna cry. At your own peril. Type, debuff. Archetype, psychic. Aspect, occultist. Stat used, moxie. Who can deny the signs? A character's disbelief in magic or fate does not protect them from its wrath. With this drop equipped, the player can warn other characters of danger and they will have their grit and effective plot armor debuffed if they ignore the warning. It works with psychic visions but is much more effective with props such as tarot cards, bad omens like inverted crosses, and other visible signs of an ill fate. You may not believe in fate, but fate believes in you. Isaac certainly played an important role in adding to the drama and a few laughs. It would be a while until we were better working with humor. That was a big ask. He got 3 stat tickets, and he paid for them in blood. Let me get this straight. Type, action. Archetype, comedian. Aspect, cynic. Stat used, savvy. When a group of survivors barrels forward without self-reflection, they can seem reckless. Having someone there to summarize the stakes can make the team look more confident and competent. With this drop equipped, the player can summarize everything they and their allies are up against, as well as their plans to stop it on screen, increasing the odds of success by making sure the audience is up to speed and the task at hand has been properly thought out. Effectively buffs the savvy of the planner or leader. So, I did understand. You're all nuts. Trash talk. Type, debuff. Archetype, comedian. Aspect, cynic. Stat used, moxie. At the end of the day, the effectiveness of a scary monster is determined by whether the audience is scared. Making fun of it can make it less scary. By making fun of the enemy on screen, the enemy's mettle is debuffed. Remember, it is the audience that the player must appeal to, not the feelings of the enemy. The guy's got butter knives on his fingers. Come on. Bobby didn't get a trop. He got something he wanted even more, a very special license. He also got 2 stat tickets. License. License number, E2455B-0001, issued to Bobby Gill. Ability granted. The holder of this license is granted the ability to invoke specific powers or wield certain objects from a horror movie realm without the need of a trop. This license authorizes the use of the Cole's dogs from the movie Permanent Vacancy. Usage permitted in the through line, all storylines X. Usage terms, lore constraints. The holder may use the selected ability within the lore constraints without the need to activate the associated storyline. Protection. The player is shielded from inadvertently triggering the original storyline. Rule compliance. The rules of use, as described in the movie's storyline, must be strictly adhered to in addition to any listed conditions. Consequence awareness. The user is not immune to the consequences stemming from improper or natural use of the ability. This license does not prevent unrelated storylines from being triggered. Rescue clause. Death as a result of using this ability subjects the player to rescue from the respective current movie's storyline. Conditions for use. 1. Requisition. The object must be acquired by the player and brought into the storyline. 2. Natural use. The object can only be used in the way the player's character would be able to use it. Notes. 1. Treat these animals well. The audience may not care if you are mutilated, but they will be very upset if these dogs suffer. Their pain will be yours. 2. Do not seek her. Misuse and revocation. Improper use of this license or the granted ability or object may result in immediate revocation and additional penalties as per the governing laws. It looked like we had a trip to the B&B soon. Dinah was very helpful in this story with her messages on the red wallpaper, but her presence in the story is tapered off, so she only got one stat ticket and a trop. Savvy Safecracker. Type, Insight Buff. Archetype, Outsider. Aspect, Criminal. Stat used, Savvy. A truly experienced thief can tell the difficulty of opening a specific lock at a glance. With this drop equipped, the player will be able to tell whether a lock can be picked and, if so, how long it will take by looking at the red wallpaper. The player's hustle will be buffed while attempting to pick it. I said it would be tough. I didn't say I couldn't do it. Having received our tickets, Silas disappeared. No cryptic messages, no pregnant pauses. It felt a little rude after all we had been through. We made our way back to our hotel room. I wanted a break. At the moment, I just wanted chicken wings and sleep. I didn't care if the centennial ever came. Tobe continued, thanks for listening.